It's cold. The winter hit hard this year, and it brought more than just snow. You found a place to stay and a few other survivors to hole up with. It's cold, but it's shelter. And the people you weren't so sure about. You've known them your whole life, but now, it's cold. And the cold does things to people sometimes. Changes them. Worst of all is this hunger. You feel it all the time now. You made yourself a promise when this all started that you would survive the winter, and that means you are not going to starve. It's cold, and you've been at the grocery store gathering supplies all day. The others know it. And they say there are bandits coming and we need to offer them food. They ask if you can spare any you found, and you want to help, but you made yourself a promise. They wouldn't understand. It's cold, but what else can you do?
Oh, come on!
Seriously? Okay, he's the betrayer.
Yeah.
For sure.
All six of his cards are food.
Seriously! No, we're voting you out. You're done.
So that's one way this game can go. Dead of Winter is a semi-cooperative game that casts you as a group of survivors of a zombie apocalypse working towards goals that will be different each time you play. You'll need to search for supplies, handle crises, build your defenses, and of course, kill zombies. You'll all also have personal objectives to go along with the main goal, but the hitch is that one of you might secretly be a betrayer, and their goal will go directly against your own. This game is intense, and it's another one of my favorites, so let's dive in. So, first things first, you gotta get the lay of the land. You've got your colony, where all of your survivors will start, and your locations, where you'll be finding supplies as well as more survivors. Each location has its own deck, so make sure to place the right cards on each space. In the colony, there are two tracks to be aware of, the round and the morale track. The round tracker will go down once every turn, whereas the morale tracker will be moved up and down based on your actions in the game. If either of these ever get to 0, the survivors lose. Where those tracks start is determined by the public objective, which you'll select at the beginning of the game. And the makers of this game suggest playing with the "we need more samples" objective for your first game, so we're going to choose that one, which means that the round and morale track both start at 6. Then follow any other setup instructions on the card. You'll also need to place the crisis deck here and keep the survivor and crossroads decks nearby. I'll talk more about what these are a bit later. Now it's time to figure out who you are. First is to deal out your secret objectives. To do this, you'll randomly draw a number of cards equal to twice the number of players. So let's say we're playing with 4, so that's 8 cards, and then 1 betrayer card. Shuffle those up and deal 1 to each player. Math whizzes at home will realize that that means there is always a less than 50% chance that your team will even include a betrayer. Next, you'll draw character cards. Now, Dead of Winter is different from most games in that you won't be playing as just one character, but a group of people known as your following. So you'll draw 4 character cards and pick 2. Then pick one of them to be your leader, which doesn't mean much, but whichever player has a leader with the highest influence value will go first. And then everyone gets 3 dice, because you will always have as many dice as you have characters in your following +1, and 5 random cards from the starter items deck, which looks just like the locations decks, but the cards say starter item on them. And really quickly looking back at the public objective card, you'll see it tells you to read a section from the handbook. This is the backstory for this game and helps justify your win condition. If the win condition is satisfied, the game ends at the end of the round, and if you've also completed your secret objective, then congratulations, you beat the apocalypse. Good job. So let's just jump into how you're going to do that. The rounds of the game consist of the player turns phase and the colony phase. At the start of the player turns phase, you'll reveal the crisis for this turn by drawing the top card of the crisis deck. Yes, there is a crisis every turn, life sucks, get used to it. This card tells you 3 things: what you need to solve the crisis, shown by the symbol on the card, which matches the symbols on your supply cards, the penalty if you don't solve it, and a potential bonus if you can solve it really well. I'll talk about how we actually solve crises a little later. The next thing everyone does is roll their dice and place them on their player mat. Like I said before, since we have 2 survivors in our following, we roll 3 dice. And then it's time for players to take their turns. Let's say we're going first this round, so we take what is arguably the coolest first player token in gaming and start performing actions. Looking back at the player mat, you'll see that it also serves as a reference guide, and you might have noticed that it also lists all of the player actions you can perform. There are a lot, but they're pretty easy to grasp, so don't worry. You'll want to go out into the world to gather supplies, so you might start by moving one of your followers to a location. That's fine. Every survivor can move once per turn. However, moving around is dangerous. Every time you move, you have to roll the exposure die, which can either do nothing to you, can give you 1 wound, can give you frostbite, which is like poison, giving you 1 wound per turn until you die or are healed, or you can get a bite. That not only kills your follower immediately, but has the potential to spread and kill others. If there are other survivors at the location you've just moved to, they have a choice. They can either sacrifice one survivor to end the spread, or they can risk it and roll the exposure die. If a blank space comes up, no one else gets bitten, but if any other symbol gets rolled, the survivor with the lowest influence dies and the spread continues, forcing you to make that same choice again. But let's say that didn't happen. You made it to the hospital safe and sound and ready to scavenge. Don't worry about this zombie here, we'll deal with him later. In order to search a location, you need to spend one of the dice you rolled earlier, but you can't just use any die. On each character card, you'll see values for your combat and search abilities. These numbers are the value a die needs to meet or exceed in order to use it for that ability. Since Mike's search value is 4, we have only 1 die that we can use for searching. To use it, we place the die in the use section of our mat and draw a card from the location deck. Unfortunately, it's junk. Literally in this case, and you need medicine for the crisis. If you had another die with a 4 or higher, you could use that to search again and draw another card. But since you don't, if you want something better, you'll have to make some noise. Anytime you search a location, you can choose to make noise to look at more cards at a rate of 1 card per noise token. Once you're satisfied, pick 1 card to keep and put the rest of the cards on the bottom of the deck. Since we got some medicine with this search, we can add it and any other cards we want to the crisis contribution space. Making noise definitely helped get the card we need, but it can have some nasty consequences, which I'll get into when I talk about the colony phase. Oh, I should also quickly mention that while searching, you might find new survivors. You don't have to play these cards right away, but when you do, draw a new survivor from the deck and add them to your following, placing the stand at the colony. You also get an extra die that you can start using next round. You might have to add helpless survivors to the colony too. They suck, but I'll talk about them later. In the meantime, while we're here, might as well take out this zombie. Like searching, attacking requires dice that meet or exceed your combat value. Mike's is 2, which means we can use this 3 to kill the zombie. Place your die in the used section and remove the zombie from the board. Then after you do that, as with moving around, you'll need to roll the exposure die because attacking zombies is dangerous. Except, as you might have noticed, Mike Cho has a special ability. When he attacks zombies, he doesn't need to roll for exposure, which is great. Every character has an ability along with their base stats. Some are passive abilities like this, and some of them are special actions that you can take. They're pretty self-explanatory, so I'll let you discover them on your own. Just keep those in mind while playing the game. Anyway, we've got 1 more die, so what should we do next? Well, we can use it to do a few things. We could build a barricade in an empty zombie space, which I'll explain a little more later. We can also attract zombies if you're feeling particularly masochistic. Spend 1 die, grab any 2 zombies on the board, and place them on any empty spots in your location. And we can also spend a die to clean up waste. Those supplies that we start with and find in the locations, they aren't just needed for the crisis. They also have some pretty nifty abilities, and you'll likely be using them a lot. Thing is, whenever you play a card from your hand, you have to place it in the waste pile. Too much waste is a bad thing, so cleaning it up is really useful. Spend a die to remove the top 3 cards in the waste pile from the game. Lastly, there are a couple more actions you can do that don't require spending dice. I already mentioned moving, contributing cards to the crisis, and playing cards from your hand. You can also equip certain cards onto your characters. These are weapons, tools, and books that provide useful skills to whichever character equips them. You can hand these from one survivor to another if both are in the same location, and if you do, the item is immediately equipped to the new survivor. Another thing you can do is request a card. If you're really jonesing for some food or junk or whatever, you can ask the other players to give you a card. If they do, you must immediately play that card and cannot add it to the crisis. Next, you can spend food tokens to increase your die rolls. During the game, you'll be adding food to your colony. Now, you'll need this to feed your people, but you can also eat it to increase a single die in your unused pile by 1 for each food token you consume. You know, like how food works. There's no limit to how much food you can eat like this, so snack as hard as you want if you want to be a dick. Which, if you're the betrayer, maybe you do. The only problem is, if you're too transparent, you might get kicked out. During their turn, any player can call for a vote to exile another player. If a vote is called, every player has to simultaneously vote yes or no, and if there's a majority yes vote, then that player is exiled. If that happens, you draw a new exiled secret objective card and reveal your old objective if you were not the betrayer. You move all your survivors in the colony to non-colony locations of your choice, rolling for exposure along the way, and now you have to follow some new rules. You can't go back to the colony. You can't add cards to the crisis anymore. If you add new survivors to your following, they show up on a non-colony location of your choice. You don't add helpless survivors to the colony anymore. You can't vote with a group. You can't spend any of their food tokens, though you can play food cards for the same benefit. The cards you play don't get put into the waste pile, and if any of your survivors die, the morale track doesn't go down. Basically, you don't have friends and no one wants to hang out with you anymore. Makes it real awkward when you run into them again later on. Anyway, that covers everything you can do during the player turns phase. It might seem like a lot, but like I said, there's a little cheat sheet on your player mat, so it's not too hard to remember. Next up is the colony phase. The player mat also lists the 7 steps of the colony phase, which are pay food, check waste, resolve crisis, add zombies, check main objective, move round tracker, and pass first player token. Paying food and adding zombies are a little more complicated than the others, so I'll talk about them after I explain the rest. So, checking waste. I mentioned before that one of your actions is to clean up waste. You spend a die, remove 3 waste cards. During the colony phase, you count how many waste cards are in the pile, and for every 10 cards, decrease the morale by 1. Next is resolving crisis. Shuffle all the cards were added to the crisis pile and reveal them. Each card that has a matching symbol counts as 1 point towards the crisis. Each card with a different symbol counts as minus 1 point. If you don't have enough points to match the crisis, you suffer the penalty listed on the card. But if you can get 2 more points than what is required, you get a bonus. After that, you check to see if the main objective has been achieved. If so, the game ends, and if you achieved your personal objectives, then you get to join in on the victory. If you didn't... Now, if the main objective hasn't been achieved, the game keeps going. Then you move the round tracker down 1 space and pass the first player token to the right. Alright, now let's talk about food and zombies. Every round, the people in the colony need to eat food, because apparently you don't get hungry if you go outside. What this means is that you need to remove 1 food token for every 2 survivors, including both player characters and helpless survivors. In this case, we would need 4 food tokens. You get food tokens by playing food cards during the player turns phase, some of which are better than others. If you don't have enough food tokens, then 3 things happen. First, don't remove any food tokens. Second, add a starvation token to the food supply. Third, for each starvation token in the food supply, decrease morale by 1. Next is adding zombies. At every location, you will add 1 zombie for each survivor present. In non-colony locations, this is pretty simple. We have 1 survivor at the hospital, so 1 zombie shows up. You'll notice we built a barricade at this location. If each other space was full of zombie and we had to add another, we would instead destroy the barricade and leave the space empty. Then we have to resolve the noise counters. Remember I told you there would be consequences for that? For each noise counter, roll 1 die. On a 3 or lower, add a zombie. Since we have to add 2 zombies and there's only space for 1, that means this location has been overrun. Remove the extra zombie instead of placing it, and the survivor with the lowest influence dies. There's only 1 survivor here, so that means bye-bye Mike. Adding zombies at the colony is a little different. As you can see, there are 6 locations for zombies to appear. When adding zombies, you start at location 1 and add 1 zombie to each location in order. Since we have 14 survivors, we need to add 7 zombies. Now, let's say the board looks a little different. First off, we're f***ed, but let's look at just how this plays out. We're still adding 7 zombies, but the results will be a little bit more pants-fillingly awful. First off, location 1 is full, so like in a non-colony location, that means it's overrun and a survivor dies. Sparky has the lowest influence, so he's gone. But that doesn't decrease the number of zombies we need to add. There's a barricade in space 2, but there's also an empty space, so that gets 1. There's a barricade and no room in space 3, so the barricade goes away and we don't add a zombie. Then we have 2 more full locations, so the last character dies and then we start killing off the helpless survivors. 6 gets 1 zombie, and then because 1 is still full, we kill another helpless survivor. Then add 1 more to space 2. 2 big things just happened, so let's talk about them before we move on. First is that we lost a lot of survivors. Mike, Sparky, that other lady, those 2 helpless survivors. And when you lose a survivor, helpless or otherwise, remove the token from the board and decrease the morale by 1. Then, all of their equipped items go into your hand if you're in the colony, or into the deck of whichever location they're in. We lost 5 survivors this round, so that would be enough to push us all the way to 0 and lose us the game. But let's say we didn't quite lose the game just yet. We did, however, lose both of our survivors, which is not good. When you lose 1 survivor, you also lose 1 of your dice at the end of the round. If the survivor you lost is your leader, pick a new survivor to be the new leader. If you lose all of your survivors, pass the first player token to your left if you have it, remove all cards in your hand from the game, and then, next round, you'll draw a random survivor from the deck and place them in the colony. This is your new following, and this is a house rule of mine, but I think you should also draw a new secret objective card. But that's just me. There are two more things to talk about, and they're my favorite parts of this game. First is how the betrayer works. And if you happen to draw a betrayal secret objective card, the game plays pretty much the same, except that you have to keep in mind ways to subtly ruin the plans of the other survivors. Your winning is first and foremost dependent on the morale track reaching 0, but if you get exiled, that's going to be a lot harder to do, so you gotta be sneaky. I'll be posting a strategy video for this exact thing in a week or two, so watch out for that. For now, the two most obvious ways to mess with them are to put the wrong cards into the crisis and attacking other players, both of which anyone can do, but you'll have the most reason to. Attacking other survivors requires you to spend a die just like attacking a zombie, but then the person being attacked rolls a die, and if that number is higher than their attack value, they don't take any damage. However, if it's equal to or less than their attack, they get 1 wound. The other thing is the crossroads. It says right there on the box, this is a crossroads game, so what does that mean? Well, the crossroads cards are like event cards from any other game, with the exception that these are conditional to the player taking their turn. How this works is that the player to your left draws a crossroads card at the beginning of your turn, and at the top of the card is a condition. If you ever trigger that condition, play immediately stops while the player to your left reads the card. This will have an immediate effect, or it will trigger a choice that you make or a vote that all players take part in. And remember, the first player breaks all ties. I like these a lot because each card is really an event, as opposed to the event cards in some games that just say things like, everyone on the red space gets 2 gold, or the player with the most uranium loses a hammer, or some bullshit like that. Anyway, that's the game. Go off and fight zombies, help your friends, and survive the winter. The next game I teach will be Above and Below, and let me tell you, this game is so good that in the middle of playing it for the first time, before even finishing it, I bought it online. In the meantime, I'll be posting a few more videos about Dead of Winter, giving strategies for playing as a survivor and the betrayer, and a third thing that I'll figure out before this video goes up. Until then, please subscribe, like the video, feed the YouTube analytics. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. Or you can tweet me at either of these 2 handles and I'll answer them as best I can. And if you feel like having a chuckle or two, you can go over to 1020 Films and have some high quality humor beamed directly into your face holes. Bye.